going? Raptorspank here, and today we're kind of doing a sort of merged video. I still kind of wanted to do a video about my, hitting masters, what decks did what, but obviously I hit it on the last day of the meta, so the video is not really worth a lot, just to be kind of it doesn't suggest good decks for you to play because it's already too late. But essentially, I just kind of wanted to go over it, talk about how I was feeling about the meta, how things went, and all that stuff, since I did finally hit masters. And then I also kind of wanted to roll it into this week's Metacheck. Obviously, this is coming a day late. That's mostly due to grinding out to hit Masters, as of filming today, because the patch hasn't hit yet, but you'll be seeing this after the patch hits on Wednesday. But obviously, came a day late, but don't worry about it. It's fine. Metacheck's going to be back to the normal time. But this is sort of going to be that Season 7 Masters celebration video. And then a look at the new things coming. No decks we're talking about yet, specific decks, but just talking about some decks I'm very excited to play. Well, I guess today that you're seeing this. Definitely a couple of things I'm pretty interested in. But first, let's talk about Season 7 and how it ended, essentially. I'm a little disappointed that I hit Masters on the last day because this is probably, I think, my second best season as far as win rate's concerned. It's not as good as the 62% last season, but a lot of times I crawled into Masters with a 52, 53. I know the 62 was the highest, but I think the highest before then was maybe a 56 at most, but I feel like 53, 54 is about where I was at for some of the earlier seasons as well, and I know that the season before last was a 53% win rate. So 58% overall. Not too bad. 106 wins, 78 losses. Taking it right off the top, this is a deck I covered. Actually, most of the decks I played are decks that I either covered now or I've covered in the past. But first deck, off the top, 88% win rate, 8 games, Elise Noxus Spider Aggro. I tried it again after taking my week off, lost to Nasus Thresh, dropped the deck, didn't play it again. But obviously, it pulled some really, really great numbers originally. It went 7-1, really, really solid deck. It's just not particularly great right now because Matron Control absolutely rolls it. And Thresh Nasus kind of lines up well against it because they can use greedy removal like Vile Feast and get a lot of work out of it, as well as just being able to block. Because obviously if their units are trading with yours, which they do very easily because they have lots of 3 power things, that's obviously really good for them because that gives them slay triggers and gets them a huge Nasus. So not really a great time to be playing Noxus Spider Aggro, so I dropped it. Next up, 82% win rate over 28 games. I think this is my best performing deck of all time at the end of the season. Closest to that being Endure Tokens, which had an 83% win rate at the end of the season with 15 games or somewhere around there, but this is definitely the most games I've played while maintaining a high win rate. Fizz TF, Fizz Elusives. I really should have grinded this more. I could have hit Masters a whole month earlier if I'd done that, because again, 28 games played, 82% win rate. It was absolutely nuts. Haven't touched it since the nerf. I think they killed the deck straight up, which it probably deserved. I'm not mad at them for that, but I am mad at myself for not playing it more, considering I love Fizz. Would have been a great way to grind Mastery on him, and he's no longer my highest Mastery champion, which is disappointing. It would have been cool to have that, and that was probably the best time to do it. I doubt he'll ever be good enough again to really grind in ranked and do well, but I'll have to grind it out in normals or something like that to try and get to max masteries. But deck did solid. Don't really need to talk about it that much. It absolutely slammed. I did a deck guide on it this season. I did a deck guide on it last season. It's an amazing deck, or was an amazing deck, and sadly its glory days will probably never come again, but again, it probably deserved that too. Then from there, 73% win rate, 11 games, Draven Renekton Decisive Aggro. I've played a lot of Decisive Aggro, and this isn't even the only Decisive Aggro deck on this list. But I've played it a lot, it's gotten me to Masters a lot, and this was a really neat new take on it. I think it's not that great now. I think if I played more of it, I would expect the win rate to go down a fair bit, probably. It's just kind of... its threats are very easy to chump block, and Thresh Nasus is really good at chump blocking with stuff like Fading Icon and all that. So this variant doesn't have nearly as many overwhelmers as previous variants, so I think it was better at the start of the season, but I would expect it to kind of go down now, which is why it's not the only Decisive Aggro deck on my list. The biggest thing that it does have going for it is obviously Rune Runner. Rune Runner is a huge threat, and it has Spell Shield, so it's protected, but because it's so expensive and it's only 6 power, I think it's just not enough power pound by pound to really justify their Shrima splash, essentially. Which then does bring us to our next deck, and the deck that I hit Masters with today. I played every single game Tuesday, just to grind out to Masters, and I did succeed. 29 games, 66% win rate, decisive aggro, Draven Darius, running Targon. Deck crushed it, and the really cool part about that is that I played Thresh Nasus 4 times today and ended with a 75% win rate. The games were fairly close, but usually won by a decent margin. And the closest game where I barely ended in the way it did was my loss. They barely stole that. And I think it was like a Nasus atrocity, otherwise they would have been dead. Like, so close. They're at like 2 hit points, I think, and I had Decimate in hand. But it wasn't enough to win that one. And we don't really have fast speed burn. That's the biggest downside with the deck. So that kind of hurt us a bit there. But still, 66% win rate, over 29 games. Got me all the way to Masters. I played a ton of Deep Monsters today, too. I'm not sure why everyone was playing it right now at the end of the season, because those are all Diamond people trying to get to Masters, too. I think I played Masters Deep Monster twice, maybe? A Masters player? And I went 6-1 into that matchup. Absolutely crushes. They have to get real lucky for that to happen. I mean, like, I'm talking, they played, I had one matchup against, I think it was the Masters player. They played 5 Dead Bloom Wanderers and lost. I still did enough burn to kill them through 5 Dead Bloom Wanderers. I beat another person with 2 Dead Bloom Wanderers and 3 Horny Toads. Which Horny Toad's great in the matchup because it can soak up all of our trample damage on and any of our big tramplers while gaining them life and tossing them towards their win condition. Really good for their deck in this matchup. And like the very first one had all 3 of them and I still beat them. So yeah, super favorite in that matchup. But we also killed Shen Jarvan twice. Went up against twice. 2 pretty blowout games. The second one was a bit close, but it's still heavily favored. So deck's actually really solid. I kind of played it out of comfort originally, and then I just kind of felt like decisive aggro was going to be the way to go, and I just decided that I felt the Targon version with more Overwhelmers was going to be better suited for the meta. But essentially, it's a much more durable aggro deck, so it's going to survive a lot of the removal, especially Thresh Nasus, with its usually 1 point of damage-based removal. It just seemed like it was going to line up really well, and it did, so it was absolutely phenomenal. The only deck I consistently had problems with was Braum Vlad, and that still was a 50-50. So yeah, I think the deck actually was killing it at the end of the season, and was a surprise like hit for beating the meta, and I didn't see any Matron control, so I can't comment on that, which was kind of the reason I went to decisive aggro with Targon, was I thought it would hold up better in that matchup, and I never got to see it, but I do think it would. From there, 58% win rate, 12 games, Ezreal Draven combo. I think this deck could have gone a lot better. So I lost the very first 2 games of this, one of which you saw if you watched my 100th video. I did have one of those games in there, but I lost 2 in a row against both Thresh Nasus, and then the next one was against Matron Control. Wasn't promising. Then I went 7-0 with it. And I was like, okay, this deck's going to be great. Started off today with Ezreal Draven, lost 3 in a row, dropped the deck. 2 of those I should have won. Actually, pretty glaring misplays, but they were my first games of the day, so that's probably part of it. But I decided at that point, I'm like, I'm going to need to grind a ton of games, and this may have the higher win rate, but it's going to be a slower deck. So I went with an aggro deck, and I figured decisive was the best. Worked really well, but that's why this deck is kind of where it is. I would expect the win rate to go up a bit if I put more time into it, but it just wasn't in the cards, wasn't lining up, wasn't going to be quick enough. So deck's decent. I think it's actually pretty 50-50 into Thresh Nasus, which is good. I think Matron Control kind of slams it, but that's about it. Everything else it does perfectly fine into. I played Discard Aggro, I think, twice and beat him both times, so that was pretty solid. Yeah, it's in a really good spot. I love Ezreal Draven. Wish I had more time to play it, but sadly, just wasn't going to be a good idea today. Following up from there, same thing, 58% win rate, 12 games, Thresh Nasus combo. I'm not sure what happened with this. It was doing a lot better, and then my most recent games kind of collapsed. I think I was still playing around with the list, and I went a little more control heavier with my list, so I had like Vengeances and stuff like that, and Withering Whales, and maybe that's not so great now. It's hard to say. It's just things didn't line up well with it. It should probably have a better win rate than that, but that's kind of the reason I avoided it for the end of my grind, was because I had been so hot and cold on the deck before that I just didn't want to take chances with it. From there, most played deck of the season, 31 games, 52% win rate, Azir Hecarim Sandfemerals. Love the deck, wish it had done better. I love Ephemerals, love playing it, abandoned it fairly early on, but I did play a ton of games on it. For those of you who like math, 52% win rate on 31 games means 16 wins and 15 losses. A lot of time wasted on that deck is what that means, sadly. But really love it. Love the archetype and all that, but sadly it's just not really competitive anymore. But it was a ton of fun at the beginning of the season. Really enjoyed it. Some of my favorite games in the season were probably the early Azir Hecarim Sandfemerals before it really got outclassed by the meta. From there, we have Taric Garen Rally mid-range with 13 games, 46% win rate. So we are into the negative win rates, but that deck was really fun. It was doing really good when Lucian Azir was meta, but it's kind of a little too niche and falls apart a little too easily. So it's definitely like it either feels like the most broken deck you've ever played, or like hot garbage. It's purely hot or cold. It's no mid-ground. You're either going to just completely crush your opponent and be laughing about it, or you're going to be throwing something at the wall, swearing to never play the game again. And that's eventually what happened, is that I swore never to play the deck again, and here we are. So, yeah, one more loss than wins, and I figured that that was the point to start cutting my losses, because it didn't feel like it was going to flip around, and I really doubt it would. I bet the win rate would go down if I continued to play it from here. Something else I played towards the end of the season, because Comfort Zone and Aggro, I was playing MFGP Burn, played 7 games, 43% win rate. So again, one more loss than win. Same thing as Taric Garen Rally. Basically, I listened to the Mobalytics tier list, and this is a really comfort pick for me. I've played this deck a lot. As longtime viewers will know, I think I've done 3 or 4 deck guides on this. It's on the grind. I don't know why this is S tier. The deck's good-ish, but it definitely doesn't feel like the best aggro deck right now, so I'm really confused why it's S tier, especially over other things. And now, I did have a little bit of bad luck. I saw discard aggro a lot, and discard aggro wins most aggro matchups, although, ironically, I won every time against discard aggro with decisive aggro. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I lost even one. So, that aggro deck does kind of outclass it at times, but MFGP Burn almost never wins that matchup, and there was a lot of discard aggro, so that might have skewed the numbers, but I really don't. I didn't feel at all like this deck was just stomping people, so I don't think it deserves an S tier category at all. And again, like, I only played 7 games on it, but this is probably my most played deck ever. Like, Decisive Aggro is getting close now, but I think I've played more Bilgewater Burn than ever before. When I hit top 100 on the leaderboards, I think I peaked at like 68th once. I was playing Bilgewater Burn every game. Like, it's easily my most comfortable deck, and I couldn't pull above a 50% win rate. And again, I didn't play enough days to really do it. I would expect it to go above 50 if I played more than like 10 games. If I played more than that, I would expect it to be above 50, but I was very unconvinced by it, which is why I didn't play it in the end, and I went decisive instead. Then Matron Watcher's the next deck, 13 games, 38% win rate. Most of those games are on the last patch, so its win rate should be better. On the current patch, I went 3-2. But I haven't played a ton on the current patch, so I can't really give you a good idea on this. I thought about playing it when I saw so much discard aggro originally, because it would be good for that, but I knew it was going to be a terrible deck to grind on, and it just wasn't always the most fun, so it wasn't my thing. I knew I was going to need to do something aggro or fast combo, so kind of abandoned it after the on the grind. It's still a solid deck. I expect it to stay solid, especially since it didn't get nerfed at all, which is a bit ludicrous, but whatever, is what it is. From there, we do have Zoe Aphelios midrange on the last patch when it was broken, and yet I had a 33% win rate over 12 games. A lot of those losses were misplays on my part, and just in general, like, there was one I lost because it went to like 30 minutes, and I just wanted to die. I hated that deck. I only covered it because I've never covered it on the show before, so I felt like I had to while it was still at the height of it pre-nerf. So I did cover it, but it's not my cup of tea. I don't enjoy the deck. It's probably been my least favorite deck to ever exist, aside from like maybe Fiora Combo. like where you're just all in the Fiora. But then again, ID Elusives I enjoyed playing against more than Zoe Aphelios, so it's hard to say. Hated the deck. Didn't regret not playing it anymore after that point. And then from there, real weird one, 25% win rate, 4 games, Braum, Vlad, Scargrounds. It was starting to trend up. I wanted to believe in it, and then I was just wholly unconvinced. It was another very hot and cold deck. If you had the combo, it was great. Other than that, not so much. So I abandoned that pretty quickly and hadn't played it since. So yeah, don't expect it to do much better than that. After that, we get into our 2 0% win rates. First one, IF Elusive, 0% win rate, 1 game. I play this every season. I hit Diamond, and then I play 1 game of IF Elusives because I can't get demoted. And I'm like, okay, gotta play my IF Elusives. For those who don't know, it's the deck that got me to Masters the first time around. Love the deck. Didn't get it this season. We had a 100% win rate last season with our 1 game win, but not this time around. Went against Zoe Aphelios, got absolutely rolled. Pretty disappointing, but yeah. Nothing much to say there. And then from there, 0% win rate, 3 games, Deep Monsters. As soon as the buffs came through to Deep Monsters, I tried it out, lost 3 games in a row, abandoned the deck, never touched it again since. But weird enough, everyone's playing it right now, or today anyways. In the last day of the grind, I ran into it 7 times, so that's pretty insane. I don't know why people were running it. The deck is bad. I wish it was good. I love Deep Monsters. I did a deck guide of it back in Season 3, but it's not good. It really isn't. I don't expect it to be good after the patch, so yeah, abandoned that real quick. And that was my climb to Masters. Bunch of fun games. Last game I won was decisive against Discard Aggro. Really neat. Just snuck it in there. It was awesome. It was real nail biter, but we did get there, and that's all that matters. After that, though, let's talk about some of the new cards. Specifically, there's a number of things I want to talk about. First up and foremost, I don't know how good this is going to be, but I love the new Piltover Elusives, the Chirian, Sumpworker, and Sumpworks Posse. The problem is, I love the idea of playing these in Elusives. So thinking something like, I don't know, playing Ionia, having Elusive Tribal with this, seems like that could be really cool, but it's going to be inconsistent because you need to create multiple Sump Workers to flip this into Posse. If you flip into Posse, it's going to be really, really strong. So then the obvious choice is to probably pair it with Shadow Wiles, but then I'm a little bit worried that it might be not aggressive enough to win, or like not consistent enough to win, because if you get your Sumpworks Posses, it's going to be amazing, but they do die fairly easily. And I don't know. I don't know if it's enough to get you there, but I'll probably try it. I'll probably try Piltover Shadow Wiles Burn, and I'll run Chirian Sumpworkers, Sumpworks Posse. We'll use Stalking Shadows. I might bring Chronicle of Ruin in as well, because that would be another good way to flip them. And then just like some Fading Memories as well. You probably put in like the traditional burn stuff in there, like not Sumpworkers, the Doom Whisperers, stuff like that, and you just get that usual Shadow Wild Piltover burn package, and just combine it with this new elusive threat, and that could actually do a lot of work. So I'm pretty excited for that. I'm definitely going to try it. I don't know how good it'll be. Maybe that's a great one to play in the first week, because it'll be an aggro deck, and that will stomp out some of the people being a little more creative. So I may actually try it, but that'll be interesting. The other things on this slide, not that big a deal. Ardent Tracker's kind of neat, but I don't think it's generally going to be worth it, although I do like the idea of the elite things. I could see Cytherea, Lady of Clouds, going into some Demacia mid-range decks as maybe like a one-of, but 10 cost unit, kind of hard to get away with because it can be answered very easily by your opponents. But since she is a 10/10 and she does buff everything else, I definitely could see this going in. Again, probably not more than a 1, maybe 2 of in Demacia mid-range decks. So that one's got some chance of showing up. Incisive Tactician, really neat. I love the idea of it. More Noxian rallies, awesome. But there's already Noxian rallies and you don't see them. You don't see the Katarinas, you don't see the Shumpos. There's a reason for that, and I don't think a 6-mana 4/5 vanilla that rallies is really going to make the difference, so maybe I'll be wrong, but he doesn't have 5 power either. If he was a 5/5, I think there'd be better chance, because then there's like LeBlanc decks that might be able to get away with that, but I think he's not going to really see any play. But thinking about some things I'm a little more excited about, Right off the bat, I'll talk about Ionia first here. I'll talk about Ionia because Ionia has always been my favorite region. Originally, anyways, haven't really played a lot of it lately because it's been dog tier for quite a while. It's been Lee Sin or bust, and I really hate that they did that to it. Like Ionia used to be the best region in the game because it was a good mid-range one. You'd splash it for deny in mid-range decks. You had good aggro decks with elusives and ephemerals originally. And then you had great control decks with Karma, and now it's Lee Sin or bust, which really sucks. I don't know if it'll be good enough now to change that fact, but it's very possible. Blade Dance, I'm gonna have to see in play to see how it goes, but I could see some sort of Blade Dance Misfortune deck maybe, where you're like turbo leveling Misfortune, but I'm still not sure that could compete with Demasia's variant of doing that. And maybe Misfortune's not the right way to think about it. Maybe there's some other better way to go with this. But you could do like some sort of Ionia Blade Dance Elusive Bilgewater mix. Bilgewater does have good elusive, so it's possible you could do something like that. The big thing out of here, the big card to take away, is that Syncopation's actually pretty busted. That's a great way for getting a lot of damage through and saving some of your most important units. I definitely could see Syncopation being a phenomenal card, and that's the best reason to start considering Ionia for aggro, is that I think that could do a fair bit of work. And like the part in me, the dream, is just that Ionia elusive shell of aggro again with Syncopation in it, and then maybe you put it with like Piltover and you try to make that whole Sunborg posse work, but not convinced by that yet. But I definitely could see Syncopation pushing some pretty sweet Ionia aggro or combo decks. So I am kind of excited for that. But the rest of the Blade Dance package seems really expensive, at least cost-wise, for what it does. I mean, Zenea seems kind of good, but at 8 mana, it's just going to be really, really hard to pull that off. And then Ribbon Dancer, a 2/1 for 2 mana, that sucks. And it only comes down with 1 extra 1/1. So, like, yeah, I'm a bit concerned. As for Aurelia herself, Aurelia makes my brain hurt, first and foremost. I think she could be good. I mean, a 3 mana 3/2 with quick attack is statted pretty effectively for a lot of similar cards. So I think that in and of itself is potentially good. She's statted with Zed, so it's really like, is she better than Zed, or is Zed better than her? And it's kind of hard to say which one of them is better. Since she does get the flawless duet every turn you have attack, I feel like she might be able to outvalue Zed. But it is kind of hard to say. I do think Aurelia could make some splashes, especially if an Ionia aggro deck is good. The fact that she gets Blade Surge when she levels up is really sweet as well, because she can essentially Blade Dance, then Blade Surge to swap with one of the blades if your opponent doesn't block all of them. Because when the Blade Surge attacks, when the blades attack, they attack by themselves, automatically free attack, but you can Blade Surge to swap with one of them with Aurelia. That's, I think, what the point is of Blade Surge here. And then Vanguard's Edge is kind of weird, but it could be good. Basically, I'm going to have to see her in play to say for sure, but I think there's a possibility for some sort of Ionia aggro deck that runs Aurelia, and probably not a ton of the other Blade Surge things. Probably just Ionia. Obviously, the more Blade Surge, the faster you're going to level her up. But the important thing to know here, too, is she doesn't have to see all of those allies attack, so you can level her up over the course of the game and then slap a leveled up Aurelia, so that's kind of sweet. But I could definitely see her being good enough, or at least seeing some play. But we're going to have to see and actually try. And I'll try to make an Ionia aggro deck at some point with her, probably. Something I am really excited about, I don't know how good this is, but I really want to try it. A deck that came out really in the beginning was Targon Shurima Landmarks, that was running the Aphelios package, like the big part of the Aphelios package, but then combined it with some cool Landmark Shurima stuff in Talia. I love that deck. It was really neat. Someone made it to Masters, and I think top of leaderboards with it, which is where I found it from. I forget the name, sorry in advance, but that was really sweet. Very tempting to try and revive that shell and just change it from the Aphelios package to this new Malphite Landmark package. And there's a number of good things here. I'm not sure about Rockfall Pass, path because it obliterates the weakest enemy, and it's very easy for opponents right now to gum up the board, which would make that kind of weak. So very unconvinced by that. But a couple Spiral Stairs, or at least one, to get Seed of Strength for Malphite would be really sweet. And then Blue Sentinel is actually really, really solid, I think. It's a 2-mana 2/3, so that's a really great stat line as is. And then what if it dies? It gives you that Crest of Insight, and the next turn you get even more mana, so it ramps you. And obviously that mana gem doesn't last; it's only that one turn, but it's still it increases your curve for one turn. You get to play things a little bit differently, which is really nice. So I do think I think Blue Sentinel could definitely see some play in that. Obviously Chip would see some play in that as well, because a 1-mana 1/1 is not that great, but a 1-mana 3/3 that it's very easy to get it to be a 3/3 that obviously would be a lot better. I don't think you put Curator in here, but just in general, I think Chip would actually be fairly strong in this list as well. So you definitely combine that, and then you definitely put some Malphites in. I don't know if you put all three. He's 7 mana. That's kind of rough. His other spells are actually pretty neat. Ground Slam is cool, because if you've summoned a landmark this game, you'll have summoned a landmark this game. It's basically 3 damage and stun. So if the 3 damage doesn't kill it, at least you stunned it anyways. But it's Targon removal. Actually pretty good. And then the Unstoppable Forces he generates every turn once you level him up. That's pretty solid too. The downside being 12 plus mana of landmarks can be a bit hard to pull off, but he's a 6-mana or a 6/10 for 7, not that bad. 7 and 11 for 7, also not that bad. Doesn't have any really great keywords to get through, but he actually, if you can get that Spiral Stairs, for example, you can give him Overwhelm, and the Unstoppable Force kind of helps you force damage through, so it might not be that big a deal. As for Stonebreaker, I think that could be decent, but it's going to be hard to get 4 landmarks out, I think, even going all into the package. So we'll see how this goes. I'm going to probably try to make it work, and so if you don't see a video on it, that means it didn't work. But those are the big things that I'm excited for. I know there's other cards and they're all neat, but these are my big ones I'm looking at right now that I'm very excited to try out. So I'll be messing around with those. We'll see where that ends up in the next coming weeks, but I'm definitely looking forward to playing on this new expansion, and I hope everyone else is too. I would love if Ionia's back and we get to play a lot more Ionia. It's my favorite region. It would give me more of an excuse to break out that old Lee Sin board again. I would love to be playing Ionia. I don't think I played a single Ionia deck this entire past season, so if they're good again, I would absolutely love that. It would be music to my ears. So here's the hoping. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more Legends of Runeterra content.